Snow fell in large flakes, covering the streets of Regina with a white blanket. Evelyn stood at the library window, absent-mindedly paging through the pages of an old leather-bound book. Her slender fingers glided over the yellowed pages, but her thoughts were far from the text. The massive library building kept her warm even in the harshest of frosts. The old wooden shelves, soaked with the smell of books and time, created a special atmosphere of coziness. Evelyn loved this place. Here she felt protected from the outside world, from intrusive thoughts about what was going on at home. Marcus had changed. The change came on gradually, like a tide. At first, barely noticeable, it became more and more obvious. His delays at work became more frequent, his phone conversations quieter and shorter, and his touches more infrequent and mechanical. Evelyn put the book back on the shelf and ran her hand over the spines of the other volumes. 7 years ago, things had been different. She remembered their first meeting at the cafe on the corner of Albert Street, where she had run in to warm herself on a frosty January morning. Marcus was sitting at a table by the window, surrounded by papers and carrying his laptop. His hair was disheveled and a coffee stain was visible on his shirt. "Excuse me, is this seat free?" she asked then, holding a steaming glass in her hands. He looked up and something flashed in his eyes that took her breath away. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just the play of the light of the winter sun in his gray eyes. The ringing of the phone snapped Evelyn out of her memories. Her father's name popped up on the screen. "Honey, are you coming to dinner tonight?" Ronald Morrison's voice sounded as confident and commanding as ever. "Yes, Dad. Marcus promised to pick me up after work." "Good. Mother will cook your favorite duck and apples." Evelyn smiled. Her father had always been short on words, but she knew behind that brevity lay a deep affection. Ronald Morrison had built his empire from the ground up, turning a small construction company into one of the largest real estate developers in the province. He was respected and feared for his toughness and unwavering integrity. Evening was descending on the city, coloring the sky a deep blue. Evelyn gathered her things and went out onto the library porch. Marcus was gone. She pulled out her cell phone. No call, no message. The cold wind crept under the collar of her coat, making her wince. 20 minutes later, she dialed his number. It rang, long, drawn out, unanswered. On the 4th try, he picked up. "I'm sorry, honey, the meeting ran late. I won't be able to go to your parents'. Urgent project, you know." There was the usual tiredness in his voice, but there was something else. Something elusive, fake, like a note in a familiar melody. "I can wait," Evelyn offered, looking out at the falling snow. "No, go without me. Say hi to your parents." The call cut off before she could answer. Evelyn slowly lowered her hand with the phone. The evening light was coming on in the windows of the houses across the street, creating the illusion of coziness and warmth. The cab took her to her parents' house in 15 minutes. The Morrisons' mansion towered above the street, 3 stories of red brick, framed by wrought iron bars and a winter garden. Everything was the same here: the perfectly trimmed, snow-covered shrubs, the lights on either side of the front door, the heavy oak door with its brass hammer. Her mother met her in the hall. Victoria Morrison retained her former beauty, only the wrinkles in the corners of her eyes giving away her age. She hugged her daughter, enveloping her in the scent of French perfume. "Is Marcus working again?" A faint note of disapproval slipped into her mother's voice. Evelyn nodded, taking off her coat. Their father was waiting for them in the dining room, sitting at the head of the long table. His graying temples and military bearing gave him the appearance of a man accustomed to command. "Where is your husband?" he asked, without lifting his eyes from the newspaper. "An urgent project at work." "3rd time this month." Ronald folded the paper. "What kind of project?" Evelyn hesitated. She didn't know. Marcus used to share details of his work with her, talk about deals and clients. Now his answers had become vague, general. "I don't go into detail. She tried to smile. You know that stock market terminology. I don't understand anything. Her father looked at her carefully. There was concern in his gaze, but he remained silent. Dinner passed in the usual atmosphere of dignity. Her mother talked about a charity event she was organizing. Her father occasionally commented on the political news. After dessert, Evelyn went up to her old room. Everything was still the same here: bookshelves, old photographs, a teddy bear on the bed. She went to the window. Across the street, in the house across the street, a young couple was setting the table. The woman was saying something, laughing. The man hugged her from behind, nuzzling his nose into her neck. The phone vibrated, a message from Marcus. Don't wait up for me. Going to bed late. Evelyn glanced at the time, 9 p.m. Once they'd stayed up late talking about everything. Now their dialogues had become an exchange of short messages and duty phrases. I'm staying at my parents', she typed back. There was no reply. The morning greeted her with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sounds of news from the kitchen. Her father was already sitting at the table, looking up stock market reports on his tablet. Did you sleep well? He asked as Evelyn entered the kitchen. She nodded, pouring herself some coffee. Snow continued to fall outside the window, turning the world into a Christmas card. Evelyn, her father set the clipboard aside. Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. She froze with cup in hand, staring at the dark surface of the coffee. Of course I am, Dad. Why do you ask? Because I know you better than you think I do, and I can see that something's wrong. Evelyn set the cup on the table. A lump appeared in her throat. It's okay. It really is. It's just, Marcus has a lot of work to do lately. Ronald Morrison rose from the table. His tall figure cast a shadow on the kitchen wall. I don't interfere with your life, you know. But if you need help, any help, you can count on me. Evelyn felt tears come to her eyes. She quickly turned away to the window, pretending to look out at the falling snow. Thank you, Daddy. The drive home took longer than usual. The snowplows were running out of time to deal with the effects of the snowfall. The cab crawled slowly through the snow-covered streets. Evelyn looked at the houses floating by and thought about her father's words. Was she happy? When had that changed? At what point did their marriage begin to crumble like a house of cards? Maybe when Marcus stopped kissing her in the morning, or when his shirt started smelling like someone else's perfume, a subtle scent he'd blamed on the new laundry conditioner. The house greeted her with silence. There was an untouched cup of coffee on the kitchen table. Marcus had already left for work. Evelyn took off her coat and walked to the bedroom. The bed was neatly made, too neat for someone who supposedly went to bed past midnight. In the closet, among the perfectly ironed shirts, she found a dry cleaning receipt. Yesterday's date, urgent suit cleaning. Evelyn sank slowly to the edge of the bed, clutching the piece of paper in her hands. The phone rang the library. She should have gone to work, fallen into her usual routine, pretended everything was fine. But something inside broke, like thin ice on a spring river. She put the check back and began to get ready for work. The mirror reflected a woman with a pale face and wan eyes. Marcus had once said he'd fallen in love with her smile. Now that smile seemed like a mask that was increasingly difficult to wear. The February chill was creeping through the cracks of the library's ancient windows. Evelyn adjusted her woolen cardigan and went back to arranging the books. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed to the top shelves. The smell of old books mingled with the scent of cinnamon. Her co-worker Greta had brewed her signature tea. "Honey, come down here a minute." Greta's voice came from behind the shelves. "There's a visitor here interested in rare art books." Evelyn came down the stairs, pulled up her skirt and headed for the front desk. A tall woman in an elegant beige coat was looking at a catalog. Her blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate style, and gold bracelets glittered on her wrist. "Can I help you?" Evelyn smiled professionally. The visitor looked up, her eyes green, speckled with gold. I'm looking for an album on 19th century Impressionists, preferably with good illustrations. Come with me. Evelyn headed toward the art section. We have some rare editions. My name is Veronica, the woman followed her, clacking her heels on the parquet. Veronica Cross. Recently opened a beauty salon nearby. Evelyn nodded, running her fingers over the spines of the books. Something about the woman was vaguely unsettling, perhaps an overly confident gait or a scrutinizing gaze. Here, take a look. She pulled out a heavy leather-bound album. Monographs of the leading Impressionists with commentary by critics. Veronica accepted the book gently, her long fingernails sliding over the cover. It's beautiful. I'll take it. While Evelyn checked out the form, Veronica considered the library. What an amazing place! So much history, so many destinies. Yes, the building was built in 1912. And how long have you worked here? 8 years. And it's not boring. It's so conservative. A faint sneer flashed in Veronica's voice. Evelyn remained silent, holding out her reader's card. Thank you, Veronica smiled. By the way, if you ever want to update your look, stop by my salon. First visit is discounted. She left a glossy business card on the counter and departed, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume. Evelyn took the business card, Veronica's beauty house in gold letters on a black background. That evening, sorting through the mail on the kitchen table, she came across a letter from the bank. Marcus's credit card statement contained several odd charges: a downtown restaurant, a jewelry store, a flower store. The dates coincided with his late meetings. The front door slammed. Marcus had returned from work. Evelyn quickly tucked the statement into her desk drawer. Hi. He touched her cheek with his lips in passing. What's for dinner? I made lasagna. Marcus nodded, loosening his tie. A vaguely familiar scent emanated from his shirt, the same one that had been left in the library after Veronica's visit. How was your day? Evelyn asked, taking a lasagna mold out of the oven. The usual, lots of meetings. He pulled a bottle of wine from the refrigerator. And you? The usual, too. New customer came in, opened a beauty parlor nearby. Marcus froze for a moment with the uncorked bottle in his hands, but quickly got over himself. Yeah? Interesting. His voice sounded too steady, too controlled. Evelyn began to arrange the food on plates, feeling the anxiety growing inside. Why don't we go out this weekend? She suggested. It's been a while since we've been out together. We can't this weekend. Important presentation on Monday, I have to get ready. They ate dinner in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Marcus checked his phone every now and then, covering the screen with his hand. After dinner, he went straight to his office, citing work. Evelyn was left alone in the kitchen. She mechanically loaded the dishes into the dishwasher and wiped down the countertop. Through the window, she could see a family gathered around the television in the house across the street. Husband, wife, 2 children. An ordinary evening for an ordinary family. The phone vibrated, a message from Greta. Check out the new cafe on the corner tomorrow. They say the croissants there are amazing. Evelyn smiled. Greta always knew how to lighten the mood. They had met on her first day at the library. Greta had been the head of the rare books department for 10 years. Beneath the German's stern exterior was a kind soul and a sharp mind. Marcus's muffled voice came from the study. He was on the phone with someone. Evelyn went to the door and listened. Yes, everything is going according to plan. No, she has no idea about anything. Of course, I'll be careful. Her heart skipped a beat. She backed away from the door, trying to tread silently. In the bedroom, she pulled an old photo album out of the closet, their wedding pictures, their honeymoon in Europe, their first year together. They looked so happy, so in love. It was a frosty morning. Evelyn walked to work despite the cold. She needed to clear her head to gather her thoughts. As she passed the beauty parlor, she involuntarily slowed her step. Through the large windows, she could see the stylish interior, black and white furniture, crystal chandeliers, gilt-framed mirrors. Veronica stood at the receptionist's desk explaining something to an employee. Even from afar, it was noticeable how gracefully she moved, how confidently she held herself. Suddenly she looked up and noticed Evelyn. A mysterious smile appeared on her lips and she waved her hand. Evelyn hurried onward, feeling the color flood her cheeks. In the library, she had her usual work to do, new additions to catalog, readers asking questions, Greta brewing her usual cinnamon tea. "You don't seem yourself today," Greta remarked during her lunch break. "Just tired." Evelyn sipped her tea. "Didn't sleep well." "Honey, I've known you for 8 years. When you say, 'just tired,' it usually means something's wrong." Evelyn set the cup on the table. A traitorous lump appeared in her throat. "Greta, do you ever feel like your life is falling apart and there's nothing you can do?" The older German woman covered her hand with her own. "Tell me." And Evelyn told about the change in Marcus, about the suspicions, about the strange conversation on the phone. Greta listened in silence, only frowning her eyebrows. "You know," she said at last, "sometimes we're so afraid to know the truth that we prefer to live in ignorance. But the truth finds its way out anyway. The only question is whether we're ready for it." After work, Evelyn decided to go shopping. Only empty rooms and a silent husband awaited her at home. The mall was crowded, soft music playing, the smell of coffee and pastries. As she passed a jewelry store, she froze. Marcus stood in the window, looking at the rings. Next to him was Veronica, her hand resting on his shoulder. They were talking quietly, smiling at each other. Evelyn hid behind a column, feeling the ground go from under her feet. Through the noise in her ears, she could hear scraps of their conversation. "It's perfect," Veronica's voice. "Just imagine their faces." "There's not much left," Marcus's reply. At the party, Evelyn didn't remember how she got to the exit of the mall. The cold air burned her lungs. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father's number, but canceled the call at the last moment. No, she had to figure this out on her own. At home, she stood under the hot shower for a long time, trying to wash away the day, the images. When Marcus returned, she was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. He undressed quietly and lay beside her, so close physically, and so infinitely distant. In the middle of the night, Evelyn awoke to the sound of a text message. Marcus's phone was flashing on the bedside table. He was sound asleep. Giving in to a sudden impulse, she picked up the phone. The screen was locked, but a pop-up notification showed the beginning of the message. "Can't wait for our party. Everything is ready." The sender was VK. Evelyn put the phone back down. In the darkness of the bedroom, the ticking of the clock seemed deafening. She stared up at the ceiling, feeling a cold resolve growing inside. Whatever Marcus and Veronica had planned, she would no longer be a silent victim. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to break, pale, wintry, merciless. A new day brought with it new decisions and new fears. But Evelyn was her father's daughter, and the Morrisons were not used to giving up without a fight. The weekend dragged on endlessly. Marcus was hardly ever home, citing preparations for an important presentation. Evelyn spent those days wandering through the rooms of their once cozy home, which now seemed like a museum of unfulfilled hopes. Every object reminded her of happy moments, photos on the walls, souvenirs from their travels, books given to each other. On Sunday night, she decided to clean up Marcus's office. As she dusted off the shelves, she accidentally touched a stack of papers which scattered to the floor. Among them was a glossy real estate brochure. Evelyn picked it up. On the spread was a mansion in a prestigious part of the city, and in the margins were notes in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Perfect for us. Check the price. Discuss with V. The doorbell rang. Evelyn hastily gathered the papers, returned them to their place. On the doorstep stood Greta with a basket of homemade cookies. Thought I'd drop by and see you. She walked into the kitchen and put the kettle on. Couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Evelyn pulled out the cups, antique china, a wedding gift from her parents. I discovered something. She talked about the booklet, the notes, the overheard phone conversation. Greta listened, stirring her tea thoughtfully. You know, my grandmother used to say, when you don't know what to do what your mother would do. My mother was never in that situation. No, but she raised a strong daughter. Greta covered Evelyn's hand with her palm. What would a strong woman do? Rain and snow drummed against the window. Evelyn stared at the wet tracks on the glass, gathering her thoughts. A strong woman wouldn't hide. She would have met the truth face to face. That's the answer, Greta smiled. Just be careful. Sometimes the truth hurts worse than a lie. After Greta left, Evelyn opened her laptop. Veronica's social media was abuzz with photos, salon openings, client meetings, parties. One recent photo showed a silhouette of a man who looked like Marcus, but it was taken from the back. Her phone vibrated. A message from her husband. I'll be late. Don't wait up. Evelyn dialed the number of the beauty parlor. After the third ringtone, a woman's voice answered. Veronica's Beauty House. How may I help you? Good evening. I wanted to make an appointment for a consultation with Veronica. Just a moment. Unfortunately, the closest scheduling window isn't until 2 weeks from now. Is that okay with you? What about Friday night? Oh, I'm sorry, the salon is closed on Friday. We have a corporate event. Evelyn thanked and hung up. A corporate event. The very party Marcus and Veronica had talked about at the mall. The next few days turned into a torture of waiting. Marcus became even more distant, hardly ever slept at home. One morning, Evelyn found a restaurant bill in his jacket pocket. Dinner for two, expensive wine, desserts. The date coincided with another late meeting. On Thursday, she ventured into the beauty parlor. Veronica greeted her with feigned surprise. Evelyn, how nice to see you. Have you decided to take advantage of my offer? Yes, I thought it was time for a change in my life. Veronica sat her down in the chair in front of the mirror. Their gazes met in the reflection. Sometimes change is exactly what we need. Veronica's voice held a subtle sneer, especially when the old no longer brings joy. She began brushing Evelyn's hair, her movements confident and professional. By the way, we're having a small celebration tomorrow. We're inviting our closest friends and clients. You should come. Evelyn felt the muscles in her back tense. Thanks for the invitation, but I have other plans. That's a shame. There will be lots of interesting people and surprises. Veronica winked at her reflection. Big surprises. After the salon, Evelyn didn't go home. She wandered around town until her feet were cold. The store windows reflected a woman with a new hairdo and a lost look. In the evening, her father called. How are you, dear? Haven't been in for a while. I'm fine, Dad. Just a lot of work. Your mother's worried. She says your voice doesn't sound right. Really, it's fine. By the way, do you want to come over tomorrow night? It's been a while. A pause on the other end of the wire. Sure. About 7 o'clock? Yeah, that would be great. Marcus returned past midnight. He smelled of alcohol and other people's perfume. He walked to the shower without even looking at his wife. Friday morning was clear and frosty. Evelyn called in to work and took the day off. She spent the day preparing for the evening. She bought a new dress, dark blue, austere but elegant. She did her makeup, styled her hair. Marcus showed up at 6, dressed up and excited. I have an important event today. He adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. Don't wait up for me. A corporate party? Yeah, something like that. He avoided her gaze, hurriedly packing. It was 7:30 on the clock. "Marcus," Evelyn stood in the bedroom doorway. "Do you love me?" He froze for a moment, then smiled strainedly. "Of course I do, but there's really no time to talk right now." A bell rang in the hallway. Marcus flinched. "It's for me," Evelyn said calmly. "Dad's coming over for a little while." Marcus's face changed. He'd always been wary of his father-in-law, a retired military man with an iron temper and a keen eye. "Maybe we can meet another time?" He crept toward the door. "I really have an important meeting." "Stay." Evelyn stepped closer. "Let's talk it over. The three of us." The doorbell rang again. Marcus grabbed his coat. "Sorry, I can't. They're expecting me." He sprinted out the door, nearly colliding with Ronald Morrison. His father escorted him out with a glance, then turned to his daughter. "Now tell me." His voice sounded softer than usual. "What's going on?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "Dad, I need your help. There's this party we absolutely have to get to." A flicker of understanding flashed in her father's eyes. He nodded silently and pulled out his cell phone. "Just gotta stop somewhere first. We need to pick up some paperwork." They got into his black SUV. The city was already turning on its evening lights, the storefronts glowing with holiday illumination. There was a long evening ahead that would set the stage. Ronald Morrison drove confidently and calmly. He asked no questions. He knew his daughter would tell him everything when she was ready. In the glove compartment was a folder with documents, the results of the surveillance of Marcus, which her father had organized 2 weeks ago, having noticed changes in his daughter's behavior. Evelyn looked at the houses floating by. Somewhere out there, in the beauty parlor, Marcus and Veronica were preparing for their triumph. They had no idea that tonight would not go according to their script at all. The rearview mirror reflected their father's face, stern, focused. Ronald Morrison never forgave betrayal, and today he was going to teach his son-in-law a lesson he would remember for a long time. The beauty parlor glowed with lights. The silhouettes of the guests flashed behind the large windows, and muted music played. Ronald Morrison's black SUV parked in the shadows across the street. Evelyn clutched a folder of papers, evidence of the affair, bank statements, photos of secret meetings. "Are you sure?" Her father put his hand on the steering wheel without turning off the engine. "Yes, I have to see everything with my own eyes." They watched the new guests drive up, expensive cars, elegant outfits, ringing laughter. Veronica greeted each one at the entrance, beaming with a smile. She wore a figure-hugging red dress, diamonds glittering in her ears, a gift Marcus had bought with money from their joint account. "Wait here." Evelyn straightened the folds in the dress. "I want to go in alone first." Ronald nodded, his eyes hard. "I'll be right beside you." The clacking of heels on the icy sidewalk echoed in her ears. The guard at the entrance checked the invitation, a fake one, obtained through his father's connections. Inside, the salon was transformed. Candles in crystal candlesticks, fresh flowers, waiters with trays of champagne. Marcus stood at a makeshift stage, chatting animatedly with a group of guests. His suit was impeccable. His hair was styled. A confident smile played on his face. Veronica hovered nearby, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. Evelyn took a glass of champagne, watching them from behind a column. They were oblivious to her presence, absorbed in each other and in the anticipation of their triumph. She could hear bits of conversation from the guests. "They say they've been together a long time." "What about his wife?" "She doesn't even seem to suspect." A cold rage spilled into her chest. 7 years of marriage, all the plans, all the dreams, all the promises, all turned out to be lies. She pulled out her phone, dialed a message to her father. "It's time." Veronica tapped the microphone, drawing the attention of the guests. "Dear friends, Thank you for sharing this special evening with us. Evelyn stepped from the shadows. Marcus noticed her first. The blood rushed from his face. Veronica hesitated half a word, her smile wavering. Don't stop. Evelyn's voice cut through the sudden silence. I want to hear your announcement too. The guests looked at each other confusedly. Marcus stepped forward, trying to keep his composure. Evelyn, what are you doing here? Can't a wife come to her husband's party? Veronica tried to take charge of the situation. Honey, perhaps we should talk privately. About what? About how you've been planning your new life behind my back? Or about how you've been spending our mutual money on your secret meetings? Evelyn opened a folder, started pulling out documents. Here are restaurant bills. Here are credit card statements. And this, she placed the photos on the table, is particularly interesting. Marcus turned even paler. The pictures showed him and Veronica entering a hotel, sitting in a restaurant, picking out a ring at a jewelry store. You followed me? His voice shook with anger. No, darling, that's the work of professionals. At that moment, Ronald Morrison entered the hall. His tall figure radiated a calm strength. Behind him loomed two men in strict suits, lawyers. Good evening. He glanced around the gathering. I apologize for the intrusion, but we have an urgent conversation. Veronica tried to save the day. Gentlemen, let's not spoil the festivities. We can discuss everything tomorrow. I'm afraid that's not possible. Ronald pulled some papers out of his briefcase. You see, tomorrow all of Mr. Bishop's accounts will be frozen due to an investigation into financial fraud. Marcus tore toward him. You have no right. On the contrary, as a member of the board of directors of the bank where you conducted your transactions, I have every right to initiate an audit when you suspect misuse of funds. A whisper swept through the hall. The guests began to slowly retreat toward the exit. Veronica grabbed Marcus by the arm, her face contorted with rage. This is blackmail. We're going to sue. Please, Evelyn smiled. It will be particularly interesting to discuss the origin of the money for your beauty parlor there. After all, it was opened with funds withdrawn from our joint accounts, and that's already fraud. Marcus collapsed in his chair, wrapping his arms around his head. His carefully constructed plan was crumbling before his eyes. Evelyn, let's talk, he began. It's too late, darling. For 7 years I've been the perfect wife. Put up with your cheating, believed your lies, but there's a limit to everything. She stepped close to him. You know what the funny thing is? I really did love you, until today. Turning to the guests, Evelyn said loud and clear, I'm sorry I ruined the evening, but I had to see the truth with my own eyes. Ronald put his hand on her shoulder. Come on, daughter, the lawyers will finish up here without us. They headed for the exit. Behind them came Veronica's hysterical voice demanding an explanation, and Marcus's heavy silence. It was cold and quiet outside. Snow was falling in large flakes, covering the city with a white blanket. Evelyn sat in her father's car, feeling oddly desolate. You made it, Ronald started the engine. Things will be different now. She nodded, looking out the lighted windows of the cabin. There, inside, her old life was crumbling. But there was a new one ahead, without lies, without betrayal, without pretense. You know, she said as they pulled away from the saloon, I guess I should be grateful to them. They showed me how strong I could be. Her father smiled, not taking his eyes off the road. You've always been strong. You just forgot that. At home, Evelyn stood under a hot shower for a long time, washing away the evening. Then she pulled out her suitcase and began packing. Photos, documents, favorite books, anything that mattered. The rest could wait until tomorrow. The phone on the bedside table vibrated. Marcus. She muted it without reading the messages. Whatever he'd written didn't matter anymore. There was a lot to do in the morning. Talk to lawyers, file divorce papers, start a new chapter of her life. But now, In the quiet of the night, she could finally just breathe. Free, deep, without the weight of lies on her heart. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall, covering the past in a white shroud. Somewhere in the city, Marcus and Veronica were trying to salvage the remnants of their plans, but that was no longer her story. Evelyn lay in bed, feeling unusually light. Tomorrow would be a new day, and she would meet it a different person, stronger, wiser, freer. In the meantime, she could just look at the falling snow and think that sometimes the end is just the beginning of a new life, a new self, a new story. The air smelled of an approaching blizzard. The wind was picking up snow swirls and tossing them through the windows of the houses. Evelyn woke up early from the nervous tension of the previous evening. The phone had been dead overnight from Marcus's endless calls. A note from her father was waiting for her in the kitchen. "The meeting with the lawyers is at 10. The car will be waiting in the driveway." Ronald's handwriting was, as always, crisp and confident. Evelyn turned on her phone, 43 missed calls, 37 messages. Marcus tossed between threats and pleas for forgiveness. The last message had come an hour ago. "We need to talk. I'll explain everything." She deleted all the messages without reading them. In the closet, she found an old thermos, a gift from Greta last Christmas. She brewed a strong cup of coffee, gathered her papers into her briefcase. It was going to be a long day. A black sedan with tinted windows was waiting in the driveway. Behind the wheel sat James, her father's head of security, a taciturn ex-military man with a tenacious gaze. "Good morning, Miss Morrison." He opened the back door. "Your father asked me to see to security." On the way to the law office, Evelyn looked out over the snow-covered city. Regina was waking up slowly. The janitors were clearing the sidewalks. The first passers-by were hurrying to work. The morning light was on in the cafes. Stevenson and Associates occupied 2 floors of an old building in the business center. They were met at the entrance by Robert Stevenson himself, an old friend of her father's, one of the best divorce attorneys around. "Evelyn, dear." He shook her hand. "Ronald is already waiting in the conference room. We have a lot of work to do." The next 3 hours were spent discussing strategy. Robert methodically laid out the documents, explaining each step. "Given the evidence of financial fraud, we can demand full restitution, plus moral compensation." Evelyn listened half-heartedly. She wasn't interested in money. She wanted only one thing: to close this chapter of her life and start a new one. "What about the salon?" her father asked, looking over the account statements. "Already had the accounts blocked." Robert tapped his pen on the table. "If it's confirmed that it was opened with money withdrawn from a joint account, Veronica could face criminal charges." There was a knock at the door. The secretary brought in new documents. The top sheet read, "Application for dissolution of marriage." Evelyn took the pen, froze for a moment. 7 years of her life fit into one line with a signature. "Are you sure?" Her father put a hand on her shoulder. "More than sure." A stroke of the pen and the past was left behind. Robert gathered up the papers, marking something in his notebook. "I'll file today. Given the circumstances, the process should go quickly." When they left the office, the snowfall had intensified. James waited by the car, scrutinizing the street. "Mr. Bishop arrived an hour ago," he reported. "Tried to break into the building. Security wouldn't let him in." Ronald frowned. "We need to beef up security measures. He could be unpredictable." Evelyn shook her head. "Marcus isn't dangerous. He's just scared and confused. Nevertheless, I insist. You'll stay with us for now." She didn't argue. The thought of returning to an empty house was depressing. Everything at her parents' mansion breathed peace and comfort. Her mother met them in the hall, hugging her daughter. "I have your room ready, and your favorite apple pie." Evelyn went upstairs, laying out her things. The window overlooked the snow-covered garden. The playground where she'd once played, the gazebo covered with wild grapes. Her phone vibrated, a message from Greta. Saw Marcus at the library, asked about you. Looks awful. Evelyn typed back, thanks for the warning. I'm safe. By evening, the blizzard had gotten worse. The wind howled through the chimney, tossing prickly snow through the windows. Evelyn sat in her father's study, sorting through old photographs. What are you going to do next? Her father set the paper aside, looked at his daughter carefully. I don't know yet. Maybe I'll go away for a while. I need to rethink things. I could get you a job at our Vancouver branch. She shook her head. Thanks, Dad, but I have to manage on my own. At that moment, the doorbell rang. James, on duty in the lobby, reported over the intercom. Mr. Bishop is with Miss Cross, requesting a meeting. Evelyn glanced over to her father. Ronald rose from his chair. Let them into the living room. Marcus looked rumpled, a rumpled suit, disheveled hair, red eyes. Veronica, on the other hand, was immaculate, just nervously rubbing the strap of a designer bag. Evelyn, Marcus stepped forward. Please, hear me out. Why? To hear another lie? It's not a lie. I'm confused. I made a mistake. Veronica interrupted him. We're here with a business proposition. Ronald grinned. A business proposition? After you tried to steal from my daughter? We're willing to reimburse all expenses, Veronica pulled out a folder, and sign a waiver. In exchange for what? Evelyn looked at them with cold interest. In exchange for you taking the statement and not making a fuss about the salon. Marcus held out his hands pleadingly. Evelyn, think about it. We can fix this. Fix it? She rose from the couch. You betrayed more than just me. You betrayed our marriage, our love, our trust. That can't be fixed with money. But I love you. No, Marcus, you only love yourself. Veronica stepped forward, her eyes sparkling. Don't play the victim. You just couldn't hold on to your husband. Ronald held up a hand, stopping the altercation about to erupt. I think this conversation is over. James will escort you to the exit. It's not over, Veronica hissed. We'll meet again in court. Absolutely, Evelyn smiled. Only I'm afraid you won't like it there. When they left, silence hung in the living room. The mother brought tea and sat down next to her daughter. You know, she said, pouring the fragrant drink into cups, I used to think that without a man, a woman was incomplete. Then I realized the most important thing is to be complete on your own. Evelyn took the cup, inhaled the familiar bergamot scent from her childhood. I'll be fine, Mom. It just takes time. At night, she couldn't sleep for a long time. Snow drummed against the window. A blizzard howled somewhere in the distance. Evelyn thought about how strange life was. What seemed immutable crumbled like a house of cards, and what she thought was weakness turned out to be strength. In the morning, she had a dream. She was standing on the shore of the ocean. The wind was ruffling her hair. The waves were crashing on the sand. And inside, an amazing feeling of freedom, as if she had dropped a heavy backpack after a long journey. She woke up with this feeling of lightness and anticipation. There was a new day and a new life ahead. How it would be depended only on herself. At breakfast, her father handed her an envelope. What's this? A ticket to Vancouver, for next week. It's up to you, but sometimes changing places helps you see things in a new light. Evelyn twirled the ticket in her hands. Maybe her father was right. Sometimes you have to go away to come back a different person. Thank you, Dad, for everything. He only nodded, turning back to the morning paper. But she saw something in his eyes that didn't require words, unconditional love and support. Outside, the blizzard had subsided. The city, dusted with fresh snow, seemed washed and renewed. Like her soul, after the storm came clarity, after the pain came healing. There was a long journey ahead, but she was willing to take it. After all, the most important journeys are journeys to oneself. Vancouver greeted Evelyn with drizzling rain and the smell of the ocean. Here on the west coast, the winter was milder, with humid air and evergreen trees instead of the prickly snow of Regina. She rented a small apartment in the Kitsilano neighborhood, overlooking the bay and the mountains on the horizon. The first few days were spent settling into her new home and taking long walks along the waterfront. Evelyn enjoyed the anonymity of the big city. No one here knew her story, no whispers behind her back, no sympathetic glances. From Greta came rare news from Regina. Marcus had sold their shared house. Too many memories. Veronica tried to save the salon, but without financial backing, the business was falling apart before her eyes. One morning, returning from a run on the beach, Evelyn spotted a familiar car outside her house. Her father's black SUV stood out among the local sedans and eco-friendly hybrids. Surprise! Ronald Morrison was waiting for her in the driveway, impeccable as always in his dark coat. "Dad? What's wrong? Does something have to happen to visit your daughter?" Worry flashed in his eyes, the same worry he always tried to hide behind a mask of equanimity. In the apartment, Evelyn brewed coffee. Her father liked it strong, no sugar. They sat at the panoramic window, looking out at the gray waters of the bay. "Marcus declared bankruptcy," father said, sipping his coffee, "trying to avoid divorce payments. I don't care about that anymore." "You should be. He's trying to rewrite some of the assets to Veronica." Evelyn shrugged. The money seemed so insignificant compared to the freedom she'd gained. "There's something else." Ronald pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "The results of the investigation." She took the documents, began to read. With each page, her face grew more and more tense. "This isn't just treason." Her father tapped his finger on the papers. "They've been planning this for a long time. Veronica is a professional fortune hunter. She's had similar stories in other cities before." "But why me? It's not like we're rich." "No, but I am, and you're my only heiress." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, trying to comprehend what she'd heard. All these months she'd thought she'd been the victim of ordinary infidelity. The reality was far more cynical. "They took advantage of your kindness, your trust," her father continued. "Marcus had to provoke a scandal, bring on a divorce, and then an accident. You would have gotten your inheritance, and he, as your husband. God," Evelyn covered her eyes. "They wanted to kill you?" "Yes. But something didn't go according to plan. Maybe Marcus really did fall in love with Veronica. Or maybe he just got cold feet." The doorbell rang. Evelyn flinched. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her father gestured for her to stop, pulling out his cell phone. "James, are you in position?" "Yes, sir. It's the flower courier." A bouquet of roses, red as blood. The note was in Marcus's familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you." "He followed me?" Evelyn tossed the flowers into the trash can. "Tried to, but my men beat him to it." She walked to the window. There was an unremarkable gray car across the street below, her father's security detail. "How long have they been watching the house?" "Since the day you moved in. I couldn't take any chances." Evelyn felt a wave of anger rising inside, not at her father, but at herself. How could she have been so blind, so naive? What now? Now we have proof. Veronica is already on trial for fraud in other provinces. Marcus could be an accessory. Or a key witness. Evelyn looked at her father thoughtfully. If he agrees to cooperate. Ronald smiled. That special smile that intimidated his business associates. Exactly, and he will agree. He has no choice. That evening they dined at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. Evelyn was silent as she watched the ships in the harbor. Each was setting sail on its own voyage toward its own horizon. "What are you thinking about?" Father asked. "About how life is a strange thing. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us save us from something even worse." He covered her hand with his. You're going to make it through this. You're stronger than you think." After dinner, they walked along the waterfront. The drizzling rain had turned into a veritable downpour, but Evelyn was in no hurry to take cover. She set her face to the drops, feeling the water wash away the remnants of fear and uncertainty. "You know," she said as her father drove her home, "I'm not going back to Regina. At least not yet. I know, and I understand. Thank you, Dad, for everything." He hugged her, tightly, like when she'd come running to him as a child with broken knees or grudges against the world. At night, Evelyn did not sleep. She sat by the window, looking at the harbor lights and thinking about the vicissitudes of fate. Somewhere out there in Regina, Marcus and Veronica were reaping the fruits of their scheming. Their plan had backfired on them. The phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "We need to meet. I'll explain everything. M." She deleted the message without answering. The past was in the past. A new day and new opportunities lay ahead. In the morning came a letter from Greta. The old German wrote about the library, about new books, about how much she missed their tea parties. At the end of the note, "By the way, there is a vacancy for the head of the library. If you ever want to come back, it's yours." Evelyn smiled. Maybe someday she would come back. But not now. Right now, her path lay in a different direction. She opened her laptop, began writing a reply to Greta. Outside the window, dawn was breaking a new day in a new life. A day that belonged only to her. News of Veronica Cross's arrest had traveled across Regina in a matter of hours. The local papers ran headlines about the fraudulent scheme and a series of similar crimes in other cities. Marcus Bishop was a key witness in the case. He had agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The Regina police station was unusually busy. Detective Simon Porter, the detective in charge of the case, was reviewing witness statements. The story was developing grimly. Veronica specialized in wealthy families, using husbands as a tool to access family assets. "Mr. Bishop is ready to testify," the young officer announced, peering into the office. Marcus sat in the interrogation room, gaunt, with shadows under his eyes. There was no trace of his former self-confidence left. "Tell us how you met Miss Cross." Porter switched on the recorder. "It was last year at a financial conference in Toronto. She introduced herself as a successful businesswoman interested in investing. And you believed her? She had impeccable references, an impressive portfolio. I checked. All the documents seemed authentic." The detective made a note in his notebook. "When did the affair begin?" "Almost immediately. She knew what to say, how to act. I thought I was in love." "And the plan to kill your wife?" Marcus turned pale. "I didn't know, at first. Veronica only talked about divorce, about starting a new life. Then she started hinting at an accident. I refused to believe she meant it." "But you continued seeing her?" "I got confused. She kept me compromised. Documents about financial fraud, recordings of our meetings." In the next room, Ronald Morrison watched the interrogation. His face remained impassive, but the fingers clutching the armrests of his chair turned white with tension. Veronica held herself differently. She entered the interrogation room with her head held high, impeccably dressed even after a night in the cell. "Miss Cross, do you understand the seriousness of the charges?" "It's all speculation." She waved her hand carelessly. "You have no proof." "On the contrary," Porter spread the photographs on the table, "here are the results of the investigation from Calgary and from Edmonton. Same handwriting, same patterns. I want my lawyer. He's on his way. But let me point out, your accomplice has given a full statement." Her composure shook. "Marcus? That weakling. He revealed the plan to murder Mrs. Bishop. That's no longer fraud, Miss Cross. It's preparation for a felony." Veronica leaned back in her chair. Her eyes narrowed. "Prove it." "Already proved it. Recordings of your conversations, documents, witness statements. You're looking at serious jail time. In Vancouver, Evelyn got the news from her father. His call found her on the waterfront, where she now spent most of her time. "It's over." Ronald's voice sounded tired but satisfied. "They're both in custody." "Both of them? I thought Marcus was cooperating with the investigation." "He is, but he's still facing punishment for financial fraud." Evelyn sat on the bench looking out at the waves of the bay, a strange feeling of desolation mixed with relief. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Dad. Really fine." She took a long wander along the beach in the evening, pondering the vicissitudes of fate. The waves rolled onto the sand, erasing the marks, as time erases the pain of the past. At a newsstand on the corner, a local newspaper headline caught her eye. "High-profile arrest in Regina. Fraud scheme uncovered." The picture showed Veronica in handcuffs leaving the courthouse. Evelyn bought the paper, settling in at a waterfront cafe. The story that had nearly ruined her life now fit into a few newspaper columns. "More coffee?" the young waitress asked. "No, thank you. I guess it's time to go home." At home, she opened her laptop, started writing a letter, one she'd been putting off for a long time. "Dear Marcus, I have no hatred for you, only pity and a little gratitude for the fact that your betrayal has made me stronger." She worked on the letter into the night, putting into the words not anger or resentment, but understanding and forgiveness, not for his sake, but for her own. In the morning came a message from Greta. "Have you seen the news yet? The whole town is talking about it." "I have. How are you?" "Worried about you. The library isn't the same without you." Evelyn smiled. Maybe one day she'd come back, but not now. Right now her path lay in a different direction. Her apartment window overlooked the mountains, majestic, unchanging, indifferent to human drama. She looked at them and thought about how every story teaches us something. Her story taught her strength, wisdom, and the ability to forgive, even those who don't deserve it. Veronica Cross's trial began in the early days of March. The Regina courthouse was surrounded by reporters drawn by a high-profile case of fraud and failed conspiracy. Evelyn watched the trial from afar, surfing news websites in her Vancouver apartment. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence, bank statements, recorded conversations, testimony from out-of-town witnesses. Veronica's story was longer and darker than originally thought. Over the past 5 years, she had managed to destroy several families using the same script. Marcus testified via video link. He was allowed to remain under house arrest in exchange for his cooperation. On screen, he looked 10 years older, his voice shaking as he described how he met Veronica and how he gradually became entangled in her scheme. "Did the defendant manipulate you?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, first with flattery, then with blackmail. By the time I found out about her plans for my wife, it was too late. She had gathered too much dirt on me." "And you didn't try to warn your wife?" "I was a coward," Marcus lowered his eyes. "I thought a divorce would solve all the problems. I didn't want to believe Veronica was capable of murder." Ronald Morrison was present in the courtroom. He sat in the front row, watching the proceedings closely. His testimony was going to be key to the case. "Mr. Morrison," the judge addressed him, "tell us how you discovered the criminal intent." "I noticed a change in my daughter's behavior. She became increasingly depressed, withdrawn. It wasn't like normal marital problems." "So you started investigating?" "Yes. I hired private investigators, looked into my son-in-law's financial dealings. There was a disturbing pattern of large sums of money being transferred to dummy accounts, dubious transactions." "When did you realize it wasn't just financial fraud?" "When I discovered the connection between Miss Cross and similar cases in other cities. The pattern was the same. She found wealthy families, seduced the husbands, and instigated divorces. In 2 cases, The wives died under mysterious circumstances. In Vancouver, Evelyn closed her laptop. It was raining outside the window, soft, spring-like, cleansing. She threw on her jacket and stepped out onto the balcony, exposing her face to the drops. Her phone vibrated, a message from Greta. "Thinking of you. How are you doing?" "Learning to live again," she typed back. Evelyn was indeed learning, taking photography classes, practicing yoga, spending long hours by the ocean. Every day brought something new: acquaintances, impressions, small discoveries. One morning she received a letter from her lawyer, an official notice of divorce. The document that ended 7 years of her life fit on 2 pages. Evelyn signed it, feeling strangely light. That same day she went to the local library. The building was modern, with glass walls and modular furniture, the exact opposite of Regina's ancient library. "Looking for something specific?" the young librarian asked. "A job, perhaps," Evelyn smiled. "I have experience." The interview went well. She was accepted into the rare books department. A new job, new people, a new chapter of life. In the evening, her father called. "Veronica got 12 years, he reported. "Marcus got probation and a hefty fine. How are you?" "Tired, but happy with the outcome. And you?" "I got a job at the library." "So you're not planning on coming back?" "Not yet. I need time, Dad." He was quiet for a moment. "I understand. Just know that Mom and I are always waiting for you." After the conversation, Evelyn stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the lights of the city. Cars whizzed by below, people hurrying somewhere, each with their own story, their own worries and hopes. One weekend she set out to explore the neighborhood. A path along the coast led her to a small cove. On the rocks sat an elderly man with a sketchbook. He was painting the sea and clouds. "Beautiful," Evelyn said, stopping beside him. "The sea is never the same," the artist smiled. "Neither is life." She watched the colors lay down on the canvas, turning into waves and sky. Maybe that was the point, to see beauty even after a storm. At home, she pulled out an old photograph, her and Marcus's wedding. Young, happy, confident in the future. She felt no bitterness looking at the picture, only gratitude for the lesson that had made her stronger. The letter from Marcus came unexpectedly, a plain envelope postmarked Regina. "Evelyn, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I did love you. I was just too weak to keep that love." She didn't finish the letter, folded it up and put it away in her desk drawer. Maybe someday later she'd be ready to read the whole thing. Spring was gaining strength in Vancouver. Sakura trees were blooming in the parks, their pink petals swirling in the air like snow. Evelyn bought a camera and began collecting a collection of moments. Sunsets over the bay, fog in the crowns of trees, reflections in puddles after rain. At her new job, she was valued for her professionalism and quiet confidence. No one knew her history, and it was freedom to be herself, without the weight of the past. "You have a gift," the library manager once said as she watched Evelyn work with readers. "You know how to listen to people." Maybe that was her path, helping others find their stories among the book pages as she found hers. Life went on, without drama or upheaval, but with the quiet joy of new discoveries. Evelyn learned to appreciate the simple moments: morning coffee on the balcony, the smell of books, the smiles of strangers on the street. And if sometimes at night she dreamed of Regina's snow and the old library, she knew it was just part of her story, a part that made her who she became. A year in Vancouver flew by. Evelyn settled into her new library, and her photography exhibit, Reflections, opened in a small gallery on Main Street. The photos show the town after a rainstorm, puddles holding up the sky, blurred silhouettes of passers-by in the windows. The opening was attended by parents. The mother, elegant in a light gray suit, examined the photographs with moist eyes. The father kept slightly aloof, but his pride was obvious to anyone who knew him well enough. "You've changed," Mother said as they dined at a restaurant overlooking the bay. "There's something new about you." Evelyn smiled, sipping her wine. She had indeed changed, internally and externally. Her grown-out hair now fell in loose waves, the calm glint of a confident person in her eyes. "Life doesn't end with betrayal," she looked at her parents. "Sometimes it becomes the beginning of something better." News from Regina came rarely. Greta wrote about the library, about new books, about how the city was changing. Veronica was serving time in a women's colony. Marcus had left the province. Some said he'd gone somewhere on the East Coast. One morning, going through old boxes, Evelyn came across her diary, the same one she'd kept during the early years of their marriage. Entries full of hopes, plans, love. She felt no bitterness reading them, just a quiet gratitude for the lessons of the past. At the library, she was promoted to head of the rare books department. The work was satisfying. Every day people came in with their stories, their searches, their questions. Evelyn learned to listen not only to the words, but also to the silence between them. "You have an amazing gift of understanding," an elderly professor, a frequent visitor to the library, once said. "It's like you can see right through people." Maybe it was her own experience. It taught her to notice what was hidden behind the facade of words and smiles. One spring day, as the sakura sprinkled the streets with pink snow, a man came into the library, tall, with kind eyes and graying temples. He was looking for a rare publication on architecture. "My name is Thomas," he introduced himself while Evelyn searched for the right book. "I restore old buildings." They got to talking about the city, about history, about the importance of preserving the memories encased in old walls. Thomas proved to be an attentive listener and an interesting conversationalist. "Shall we have coffee?" he suggested, returning the book a week later. Evelyn hesitated a second. "Let's have tea instead. I know a nice place by the bay." They met in a small cafe overlooking the water. Thomas talked about his projects, about old houses that held the stories of generations. Evelyn shared her love of photography, of moments caught in the lens. "Every building has a soul," Thomas said as he showed her his projects, "just like every human being. The important thing is to be able to feel it." Their relationship developed slowly, without hurry or pressure. Thomas didn't rush things, as if realizing that Evelyn needed time. They walked along the promenade, visited exhibitions, talked about everything in the world. The parents noticed a change in their daughter during another visit. "You're glowing," the mother said when they were alone together. "Is it because of him?" "Not only that," Evelyn shook her head. "I've learned to be happy on my own. Thomas just makes that happiness fuller." Ronald Morrison, of course, made inquiries about his daughter's new chosen one. Thomas was exactly what he appeared to be, a successful restorer, respected in the professional community, a widower with an impeccable reputation. "He's a good man," the father said after meeting him in person. "And most importantly, he sees you as a person, not a trophy." Over the summer, Evelyn organized a series of evenings at the library on the town's history. Thomas helped with presentations, talked about old buildings, and showed photos of restoration work. At one of these evenings, Greta arrived unexpectedly. The old German woman hugged her former colleague and gave her an attentive look. "You finally found your way," she said. "I always knew it would be all right." After the presentation, they sat in the cafe for a long time, reminiscing about the past. Greta told them that the old library in Regina was closing for renovations. "Maybe you'd like to be part of the project," she asked, "as a consultant." Evelyn thought for a moment. A year ago, the thought of returning to Regina would have caused panic. Now she felt strong enough to face the past. "I'll think about it," she replied. "Maybe it's time to close that circle." In the evening, she and Thomas walked along the beach. The sun was setting over the horizon, coloring the water with golden hues. "Are you coming?" he asked when she told him about Greta's offer. "I don't know. What do you think?" "I think sometimes you have to come back to move on." Evelyn looked out at the ocean. The waves lapped at the sand, erasing the marks, the way time erases the pain of the past. "You know," she said, "I'm not afraid anymore. Not of the past, not of the future." Thomas took her hand. His palm was warm and secure. "Then perhaps we should ride together? I have just the experience in restoring old libraries." She smiled, feeling warmth spill inside. Life really doesn't end with betrayal. Sometimes it just begins. At home, Evelyn pulled out an old photo album. On the first page was her and her parents at the old library the day she got the job. Young, uncertain, full of hope. She's different now. Stronger, wiser, calmer. The past has taught her to appreciate the present and not be afraid of the future. In the morning, a letter arrived from the director of the Regina Library, an official invitation to participate in the renovation project. Evelyn reread it several times, then dialed Thomas's number. "I'm in," she said. "Shall we go together?" "Sure." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I've already started gathering information about the building." That evening she wrote a letter to her parents, telling them of her decision. The reply came almost immediately, a short message from her father, "Proud of you." Evelyn stepped out onto the balcony. The city below shone with lights. The air smelled of sea and summer. She thought about how strangely life works. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. Tomorrow the preparations for the trip would begin, the meetings, the plans. But today you can just stand here, breathe the salty air and know everything will be okay. Because now she knows her strength and her worth, and the old library in Regina will wait for her, renewed like herself. Regina greeted them with the first snow of fall. The flakes swirled slowly in the air, covering the city with a white blanket. Evelyn stood at the hotel room window, watching the familiar landscape transform. "Ready?" Thomas came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. The old library awaited them, a stately red brick building, the keeper of thousands of stories. Nothing had changed here in the past year and a half. Only the ivy on the walls had turned yellow in preparation for winter. Greta met them at the entrance, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. As she hugged her former colleague, she whispered something in German, words of blessing and welcome. "You're finally home," she said, pulling away. "The library has missed you." Inside, it smelled of dust and time. The shelves were empty. The books had already been moved to temporary storage. Thomas plunged straight into his work, inspecting the walls and floors, making notes in his clipboard. "Beautiful building," he said, running his hand over the wood paneling. "So much history, so much character." Evelyn wandered through the familiar halls, reminiscing. This was where she had first seen Veronica, the fatal beauty who had ruined her former life. Now this memory did not cause pain, only a quiet gratitude for the lessons of the past. News of the former actors in her drama came rarely. Veronica was still serving her sentence, and they said she had changed a lot in prison, gaunt, aged, lost her gloss. Marcus had settled in Montreal, working in a small brokerage firm. He'd recently sent a card, a brief apology, and a wish for happiness. "Miss Morrison?" The young architect interrupted her musings. "We need your advice on the layout of the reading room." The remodeling project was massive. Not only were the foundations to be strengthened and the communications to be updated, but also a modern space to be created while preserving the historic spirit of the building. In the evenings, she and Thomas walked around the city. Evelyn showed him places connected to her past the cafe where she first met Marcus. the park where she loved to read, the old waterfront. "It's strange to go back," she'd say as they sat in a cozy restaurant. "Everything is so familiar and yet so different." "Because you've changed," Thomas covered her hand with his. "We see the world through the lens of who we are." In town, their project had generated a lot of interest. Local newspapers wrote about the revitalization of the historic building, interviewing Thomas and Evelyn. At one such meeting, a reporter asked, "What does this library mean to you?" Evelyn reflected. "It's a place where stories take on new life, just like people." Her parents visited often, monitoring the progress of the work. Ronald Morrison watched with approval as his daughter confidently led the process of cataloging and moving rare books. "You've blossomed," her mother said one evening as they drank tea at her parents' home. "I can finally see the old sparkle in your eyes." Work on the project was in full swing. Thomas proved to be not only a talented restorer, but also a sensitive supervisor. Under his leadership, the old building was gradually transformed, preserving its soul. One day, Evelyn accidentally met Veronica's former friend, the administrator of a beauty salon. The woman averted her eyes at first, but then dared to approach. "I must apologize," she said. "I knew about her plans, but I kept quiet." "It's all in the past," Evelyn replied calmly. "We all make choices and live with the consequences." It had been a snowy winter in Regina. In the evenings, she and Thomas sat in the temporary apartment discussing restoration plans in the future. Their relationship deepened naturally and quietly, without drama or upheaval. "You know," he said one day, looking out at the falling snow, "I'm thinking of staying here, after the project is finished." Evelyn turned to him. "Really? There's so much work to do here, so many beautiful old buildings. And most importantly, you're here." She pressed herself against him, feeling her heart fill with warmth. "Maybe sometimes you have to go back to move forward." In the spring, the library began to take on a new look. Cleaned brick walls shone in the sunlight. New windows let in more light. Restored wood paneling exuded the scent of wax and time. Greta, watching the transformation, often wiped away tears. "It's like an old lady putting on a new dress," she said, "but still as majestic." On the day they started putting the books back in their places, Evelyn found her old diary in a far corner of the vault, the same one she had kept in her early days here. Flipping through the yellowed pages, she smiled at her naive dreams and hopes. "What's in there?" Thomas asked, peering over to her. "One girl's story," she replied, closing the notebook, "who didn't know that everything important was ahead of her." The opening of the renovated library was set for early summer. Newspapers wrote about the heritage revitalization, television ran reports. But what mattered most to Evelyn was the reaction of ordinary visitors, their admiring glances, their quiet exclamations of surprise. On opening day, she stood on the steps of the library holding Thomas's hand. Nearby, her parents, Greta, co-workers, friends. The ribbon was cut, the doors swung open, the first visitors entering the renovated halls. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked quietly. Evelyn looked at the building that had become a symbol of her own rebirth, at the people rushing to the bookshelves, at the sun playing in the stained glass windows. "Yes," she answered. "Now I am." In the evening they climbed to the roof of the library. The city spread out below, lighting up the evening lights. Somewhere out there, in the past, another Evelyn remained, confused, betrayed, broken. But that story had long since ended. Now a new one was beginning, the story of a woman who found strength in her weakness, wisdom in her pain, and love where she least expected it. "What are you thinking?" Thomas put his arm around her shoulders. "About how sometimes you have to lose yourself to find something more." Downstairs, the library doors opened. The last visitors were leaving the building. Tomorrow would start a new day, bringing new stories, and she would be here to help them find their place on the shelves of life. And the old library will keep her secret, the story of how betrayal can be the beginning of the road to happiness. You just have to find the courage to follow that path to the end.